The for sale sign had barely been planted in the lawn across the street when Alex Martinez felt a sense of dread. Oakwood Estates had been his peaceful haven for nearly a decade, until Karen Wilkins arrived with 3 moving trucks, a list of complaints, and a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws that she wielded like a weapon. "Your azaleas are 6 inches taller than regulation," were literally the first words she spoke to him, not even bothering with a hello. By sunset on moving day, she left violation notices on 7 different doors in the cul-de-sac. Within weeks, Karen had somehow secured a position on the HOA board through what neighbors called a tactical coup during a sparsely attended emergency meeting. Her reign of clipboard terror transformed the once friendly neighborhood into a suburban battleground of measuring tapes and passive-aggressive emails. Alex mostly flew under Karen's radar until the day his business took off. After landing a major renovation contract, he invested in a used Ford Econoline van. It wasn't pretty with its navy blue paint fading to a curious purple in spots, but it was perfect for his growing handyman business. He christened it the Toolbox and proudly parked it in his driveway. The next morning, he found Karen circling it like a shark, taking photos from every angle with her iPad. By afternoon, an emergency notice appeared on his door, his email, and, inexplicably, taped to his garbage can. "You have 24 hours to remove this commercial vehicle from view," the notice screamed in bold red text, along with a grainy photo of his van with crude circles drawn around the ladder rack. When Alex brought the actual HOA regulations to the next meeting, highlighting that only vehicles with permanent advertising exceeding 2 square feet or exceeding height restrictions of 7 feet were prohibited, Karen's face contorted into that particular expression that had earned her the neighborhood nickname. Behind her back, residents called it full Karen mode. "There are written rules, Mr. Martinez," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "and there are community standards." The way she adjusted her leopard print reading glasses made it clear. This wasn't about bylaws. This was personal. The following weeks transformed into what Alex's Army veteran neighbor dubbed the Great Van Crisis of Oakwood Estates. Karen escalated her campaign with military precision. First came psychological warfare. The neighborhood newsletter suddenly featured a full-page expose titled "Property Values Plummeting Due to Unsightly Vehicles," complete with a shadowy photo that was unmistakably Alex's van, but edited to look significantly more dilapidated. Next, the propaganda phase. Mysterious flyers appeared on community bulletin boards, showing before and after photos of neighborhoods ruined by commercial ISOs. Alex had to admit Karen's Photoshop skills were impressive, if ethically questionable. Then came the ground assault. Alex returned from a client meeting to find his van plastered with neon orange stickers, reading "VIOLA" on, that left sticky residue when removed. Security footage from his doorbell camera caught Karen applying them at 5:43 a.m., wearing what appeared to be a black tactical turtleneck and gardening gloves. "She's treating this like a special ops mission," laughed Diane from across the street, bringing Alex cookies as a show of solidarity after Karen reported his bird feeder as an unauthorized feeding station. What Alex didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Karen's bizarre fixation on his van was merely the visible symptom of a much deeper domestic drama unfolding. "Look, I just needed the money," Peterson confessed after minimal questioning. "This lady who said she was from some HOA offered me $500 cash for an off-the-books tow. Said her neighborhood had authorization, but the regular towing company was backed up for weeks." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "She paid half up front and said her associate would handle the rest." That associate, he explained, had directed him to leave the van at a specific address, a supposedly vacant warehouse unit at Westlake. He said he was a special investigator for the county, had the badge and everything. How was I supposed to know? As officers were questioning Peterson, something much more dramatic was unfolding at the Grand Summit Hotel. Richard Wilkins had ignored the "Do Not Disturb" sign and used the key card Richard Wilkins, Karen's husband of 22 years, had begun compiling his own evidence file. Karen's emergency HOA meetings were growing suspiciously frequent and occurring at odd hours. Her phone was suddenly password protected with facial recognition. Her laptop slammed shut whenever he entered the room. But the red flag Richard couldn't ignore was the mysterious black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows he'd spotted 3 times now, once parked 2 blocks from the house, once near the community center during a supposed special budget meeting, and once idling outside the supermarket where Karen claimed she was inspecting shopping cart return compliance. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in aviator sunglasses, never got out when Richard was watching. But twice now, Richard had noticed Karen's lipstick looked freshly applied when she returned from these meetings, the same coral shade she'd stopped wearing around him years ago. Tuesday, October 12th began like any other autumn morning in Oakwood Estates, sprinklers hissing, commuters departing, and Karen Wilkins power-walking the perimeter of her property with a measuring tape to check if Mr. Gonzalez's new fence was regulation height. At 9:07 am, Alex left for a major client presentation, deliberately taking his sedan instead of the van to avoid getting house paint on his suit. The van sat in the driveway, unaware it was about to become the center of a neighborhood legend. At precisely 10:15 am, a time multiple witnesses would later confirm with unusual certainty, a white tow truck with freshly applied magnetic signs reading Community Enforcement rolled into Alex's driveway with military precision. A broad-shouldered man in what appeared to be a police-adjacent uniform stepped out, aviator sunglasses concealing his eyes. 82-year-old Mrs. Foster, a retired courthouse clerk with a pathological distrust of authority, emerged from her house clutching her morning tea and her Pomeranian, Judgy. "Who authorized this?" she demanded, positioning herself between the man and the van like a 4'11" human barricade. "I'm on the neighborhood watch and wasn't notified of any enforcement actions today." The man flashed a badge in a leather wallet that snapped shut too quickly for her to read. "Ma'am, we're contracted by the HOA for violation remediation. Standing order from the board." His voice carried the practiced authority of someone used to not being questioned. "I've lived here 26 years. Mrs. Foster replied, unmoved. "Show me the paperwork." The man produced an official-looking document on HOA letterhead with what appeared to be the board president's signature. What Mrs. Foster couldn't know was that the signature had been lifted from the community pool waiver forms and photoshopped onto the letterhead Karen had access to as board secretary. Within minutes, Alex's beloved toolbox was hooked up and gone, leaving only 2 faint oil spots on the concrete as evidence it had ever been there. Meanwhile, across town at the Grand Summit Hotel, Richard Wilkins sat in his Subaru, heart pounding as he stared at the GPS location on his phone. After weeks of growing suspicion, he'd finally installed a tracking app on Karen's iPad, the one she never password protected because it only had her HOA violation photos on it. The pulsing blue dot had been stationary at this luxury hotel for 45 minutes now. Parked 3 spaces from Karen's white Lexus was the black Escalade he'd been seeing around the neighborhood. Richard's hands trembled as he approached the front desk, his 22 years of marriage flashing before his eyes. "My wife forgot her medication," he explained to the sympathetic clerk. "Karen Wilkins. She should have checked in recently." The young clerk typed quickly. "Oh yes, Mrs. Wilkins is in suite 214 with Detective Johnson. They asked not to be disturbed, but for medication I can ring them." Detective Johnson. The name hit Richard like a physical blow. All those emergency HOA meetings were with a detective. But why the hotel? Why the secrecy? Unless Karen wasn't having an affair at all. Unless she was involved in something much, much worse. By 2:18 p.m., Alex's van had officially been declared stolen. Detective Sandra Orozco of the County Sheriff's Department hadn't expected to spend her Tuesday afternoon investigating a missing handyman van, but Mrs. Foster's doorbell camera footage had raised immediate red flags. "That's not a real badge," Orozco said, freezing the frame where the officer flashed his credentials. "And that's definitely not our uniform." 23 minutes later, and APB went out for the tow truck. He charged $15,000 per case. Detective Orozco explained to a stunned community meeting at the Oakwood clubhouse, and had serviced over 40 clients in your neighborhood alone. The dominoes fell quickly. Johnson's client list became public during arraignment, revealing that nearly 1/5 of Oakwood Estates households had hired him at some point. Neighbors who had smiled at each other at community barbecues for years now avoided eye contact at the mailbox. Karen's involvement proved both simpler and more complex than expected. Financial records revealed she had indeed hired Johnson to investigate Richard, paying his fee with $12,000 embezzled from the HOA's Landscape Enhancement Fund. The missing money explained why the promised community butterfly garden had mysteriously transformed into a rock garden with a single plastic flamingo. The van theft had been Johnson's idea, a solution to his surveillance challenges. Mr. Martinez's vehicle was perfect, explained the prosecutor at Johnson's bail hearing. Large enough for equipment, nondescript enough to park anywhere without suspicion, and this is key, already familiar in the neighborhood so residents wouldn't be alarmed by its presence. What neither Karen nor Johnson could have known was that Alex had installed a state-of-the-art security system in his van after a recent tool theft. The system included a hidden dash cam that activated with any movement, capturing hours of Johnson's activities, including his surveillance of at least 7 households. Most ironically, the camera had recorded Johnson following Richard to his aunt's house on multiple occasions. The mystery woman, Karen, had been certain Richard was visiting was indeed his 76-year-old widowed Aunt Martha, for whom Richard had been secretly building a wheelchair ramp and walk-in shower, planning to reveal the renovation as a surprise for Karen's upcoming birthday, since Martha was Karen's favorite relative. The fallout was spectacular. The county courthouse experienced what clerks called divorce palooza, as 12 couples filed for dissolution within 2 weeks. HOA board members resigned en masse when their secret discretionary fund was discovered. Karen faced felony charges for embezzlement, conspiracy, and filing false police reports. Johnson's charges filled 2 pages of legal documents, the most serious being operating an unlicensed forensic laboratory and illegal collection of genetic material. For Alex, vindication came in multiple forms. His van was returned, professionally detailed by the Sheriff's Department's evidence team, along with a $42,000 settlement check from the HOA's insurance policy covering leadership malfeasance. At the emergency HOA election that December, Alex arrived wearing what became his campaign uniform, a T-shirt printed with the words "My Van, My Choice" over an image of the now famous Econoline. He won the presidency by the largest margin in Oakwood history, with his entire reform slate sweeping the board positions. His first official act? Establishing the Reasonable Humans Amendment to the HOA bylaws, which included mandatory therapy sessions for any board member who issued more than 3 violations notices in a single month. As for Richard Wilkins, he sold the house across from Alex within weeks, moving in with his Aunt Martha while finalizing his divorce. On moving day, Alex helped him load the truck, the 2 men having formed an unexpected friendship through shared trauma. "You know what's funny?" Richard said as they carried out the last box. "Karen was so busy looking for affairs that didn't exist, she completely missed what was actually happening under her nose." "What do you mean?" Alex asked. Richard smiled. "Mrs. Foster from next door, the one who tried to stop them from taking your van. She's been dating the HOA treasurer for a year. They met at the board meeting where Karen first tried to have your van banned." 6 months later, a refurbished blue Econoline still sat proudly in Alex's driveway, now joined by 2 others, painted the same shade of blue, all part of his expanding toolbox handyman services, which had received so many sympathy jobs after the scandal that he'd had to hire 3 employees. And on the van's bumper, a custom-made sticker reads, "This vehicle protected by karma," and really good dash cams.